Good evening and welcome to the November 28th regular meeting of the Garrison Union Free School District Board of Education meeting. Our first agenda item, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag, join me please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll do a little preamble. No, that's okay. Here's what I'm going to suggest. The first agenda item is a PISA project update. 2 meetings ago, we asked Garrett and Jason, our engineer and financial counsel, to work up 3 possible scenarios for our consideration. The first being the base case, which we have seen already. The second being an a case that included air conditioning using, for want of a better term, conventional means to accomplish that. And the third case being an air conditioning solution which included a geothermal application. They have done that. They have come back with some costs associated with each of those possible scenarios. 2 weeks ago, the Monday before Thanksgiving, they met with the facilities committee and presented the information that we had asked for. The facilities committee considered their recommendations and in turn has a recommendation for the board. So I'll ask somebody from the facilities committee to summarize that recommendation, and then Garrett and Jay will be here to answer any questions we have about that recommendation. Sound like a plan? You guys, flip a coin.
Okay, how about I start and you jump in if that works, okay? Okay, so the facilities committee met and we had a robust conversation as we always do. The facilities committee's role here is to make a recommendation to the board about what they see as a viable rationale for why the district should pursue offering to the public a bond in order to address needs within the building. So, having considered the various evaluations and assessments given to us by the architecture firm, we recommended that we pursue this PISA project, which stands for Preservation, Innovation, Safety or Security, and Accessibility. During that process, we discovered that one of our preservation notions was to preserve a heating system. It turns out that the attempt to preserve our heating system necessitated a replacement of the heating system in the elementary school. As such, the architecture firm offered us a variety of options. Thus, we decided to recommend to the district, or recommend to the board, that a rationale exists to offer a bond to the public. That bond would cover very basic, essential needs for our students and also provide a healthy and robust heating system. In addition, the facilities committee determined that it would be very wise and fairly reasonable that one of the proposals offer an air conditioning amendment to the heating system. That is to say that we offer the ability for the heating system to provide air conditioning. We believe that there's a rationale for that, and that there's a strong rationale that has to deal with the hostility of the work environment, as well as the durability of our scheduling, that considering how climate change and how weather events have been increasing in severity, that we would like to maximize the possibility of air conditioning. So, thus, we argued and we discussed, and we believe that there is a rationale for the bond to consider air conditioning. In so doing, we discussed 2 possibilities for air conditioning. One would be a heating system that could be converted to an air conditioning in the conventional univent system. And the second would be the possibility of geothermal. We discussed very much in a rigorous way about the values and the costs of each opportunity, and we thought there was a clear rationale for offering both opportunities to the public, so that they have, that we believe that there's a rationale to offer this bond in two offerings. One, a basic program that would have air conditioning and heating, and the second, air conditioning and heating achieved through geothermal. So since those rationales exist, we believe that it is only responsible to provide the public with the opportunity to vote on those rationales. And that is the determination we came to. I hope that wasn't too long-winded or confusing, but that is that.
Add something to it.
Go for it.
So the one thing to note is that the new heating system is for the elementary school only. And in scenario 2, air conditioning would be added to the current system in the middle school, which is separate.
Right.
And it would be that way for scenario 3 as well.
We thought that in replacing the heating system for the elementary school and offering air conditioning to the elementary school, it would be inappropriate to deny the middle school the same offerings. So we believe that the heating and AC should be offered to the entire facility.
Sorry, so scenario 1 is
Scenario is the base
the
case.
base, no air conditioning, no
air
geothermal.
conditioning, no
Scenario 2 is plus air conditioning for both schools.
Both courses.
And scenario 3 is
Same thing, but with
geothermal for the elementary school only, and air conditioning for both schools. One of them piggybacked off the geothermal and one
Right.
Right.
traditional air conditioning.
Right. So having vetted those things, we believe that there are good rationales to provide the opportunity for the public to for the board to consider moving those forward so that the public could have an opportunity to vote on them.
Garrett or Jay, you can take this up in any way, you want. You guys did the costings, estimates on both scenario 2 and scenario 3. Each has different, obviously, one's more expensive than the other, each has different tax implications. And maybe you can take us through the summary sheet that you prepared on the financials related to scenarios 2 and 3.
Can I ask one question
No,
first, just to set the stage for that, because I think, and I may be misremembering the range, Garrett, but previously we'd not asked you, and you'd not therefore done a specific estimate of the geothermal. It was a sort of, based on your experience, I think it was like $500,000 to $1 million incremental to the base proposal, I'll call it.
Right.
I assume that now, because there's a specific number here, you've refined that to what you think the geothermal plus air conditioning plus traditional air conditioning would actually cost.
Correct. So we ended on the high end of the range. That was where we landed. And the decision was that we want to be on the conservative side of the budgeting for you moving forward. If there are ways that the geothermal system can be done more cost effectively based on drilling wells and tests and that engineering, then the cost could come down. But from a budgeting standpoint, we're saying you should be at the high end of the range.
Okay, so there wasn't really further analysis of it. You were comfortable with the range, and right now we're just saying,
better be on the high end.
let's
Yeah.
assume the worst for the
Exactly.
high end, and
Yeah.
it might be a bit better, but
Yeah, if you get
It's
grants,
unlikely to be
you know,
worse.
those kinds of things. Yep.
thank you.
So that kind of gets into a little bit from Garrett's and the costing in terms of the different scenarios, and then what we have up here for the summary is more from the financial end as far as the end cost to the taxpayers. So we've kind of created a summary comparison sheet to make it easier to see it all on one page. So starting at the left here is scenario 1, that's kind of what you've already seen previously from some of the previous discussions. So all the same information that was there before, just kind of condensed onto one page, and we updated the vote date just to assume May of 2019. But at the end of the day, the average cost to the average $500,000 house with a star exemption would be $26 per homeowner in terms of a marginal increase in taxes. And just as a reminder, in case you don't remember from the previous meetings, that's factoring in you have a drop off in debt coming up from some of your existing debt, and the district's also putting in $921,955 in capital reserve to help offset the cost of the project. So that was all factored into coming up to those numbers. So as we build this out to scenario 2 and 3, still looking at the same assumptions. You still have the debt dropping off. You're still putting in 921 in capital reserves. The one difference is now you'll see the bond's going to go up to account for the increased project cost. So instead of bonding 6.1 million in the base, now you'll bond 6.6 in scenario 2 or 7.8 in scenario 3. So that is one factor in why the cost would go up. The other factor highlighted in yellow here is bond percentage. So that's
You have to go slow for us on this one, 'cause
okay.
this is where I need help.
Right. So another term for bond percentage, project dateability essentially. So the state sets for every school district a maximum cost allowance, they call it, or basically, based on the student capacity you're building, what is the maximum amount that they will aid you at. So you can vote any dollar amount you want, and you can spend that money as long as you have an approved project, but the state will only aid you up to a certain amount based on the capacity of your buildings. So what we included here in the presentation is just a look at the different scenarios. So where we were before, as you can see, we were already bumping pretty close to those aid ceilings in the base scenario. So for construction, your maximum is 5.9 million, and for incidentals, which is soft costs plus any site work, so anything more than 10 feet outside the building, like parking lots, fields, things like that, your maximum allowance is 1.2 million. So you can see in this base scenario, we had a little bit of room on the construction side, about 600,000 we were still under by, but we're already a little bit over the aid ceiling for the incidentals. Then as the project costs get bigger, going to scenario 2, you can see that 416,000 we were over now gets a little bit bigger, because as the construction costs go up, the incidental costs go up also, because we use kind of a ratio of about 20% of construction for that as an estimate. And then in scenario 3 is where we'll actually see now you're even getting above the construction aid ceiling as well. So now with that increased cost on the geothermal scenario, you're spending 6.7 in hard construction dollars compared to the 5.9 million aid ceiling. So now you're up to about $1.5 million in non-aidable project costs versus in the base scenario only about 400,000. So that's one of the other key factors in determining these costs.
Two questions. The aidable, within the aidable amount, how much aid do we get?
Your building aid ratio is 10% here on the summary page.
Okay, so they got it. So they cover 10% of the allowable amount.
Right.
And the second question, the yellow highlighted bond percent is what's the numerator and denominator there?
So we kind of start as a starting point at 95%. We assume, so if Garrett tells us that the whole project's going to be aidable, everything is eligible as far as the type of work you're doing, we conservatively back down to 95% just because when the state goes to audit the final cost reports, they might ding some stuff out to say this is more maintenance in nature or this is a non-aidable expenditure. So we build a little bit of cushion there, start at 95. Then the difference between the 95 and these numbers is essentially the ratio of what you're over the aid ceilings by compared to the total project cost.
So sorry, but the definition of that, what's the meaning of estimated bond percent? It's 89% of what?
Total amount of project cost that we expect to be aidable compared to the total project cost. So essentially, if you're in scenario 1, the total project is $7,047,620.
Yeah.
So we're saying 89.4% of that $7 million will be eligible to receive the aid at the 10% building aid ratio.
Okay. So it's not really bond percent, it's 8%.
Yeah, bond percent is the term that the state uses, so that's why I put it on there. But yeah, it's basically the percentage of the project that's aidable.
And do they aid with the entire amount or just the amount of the bond? Because we're putting like 900-some thousand.
They aid on the project cost, so that you do receive aid on the capital reserve as well.
On the capital reserve as well.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. So, and then in terms of the actual dollar amounts, when you look at it, the sort of $26 that we were referencing in the base scenario, once you update for scenarios 2 and 3, that you're looking at in scenario 2, that would go up to a $49 tax increase for the average $500,000 house, and then scenario 3, that jumps up to 106. This is what we would estimate that the cost for the average $500,000 and we had the range for, Senior Star and North Star on here as well, for anybody who wants to see that, but that kind of gives you that range of, $26 on the low end, the base scenario, up to 106 if you go for the whole scenario of the geothermal. Any other questions on the assumptions? I know I kind of didn't get too much into like bond rates or anything like that, because we've covered that in the past, but if you need me to, I can go to that as well.
The 28, scenario number one, the $28 per year per thousand estimate was as close as we could get to what we had said originally about this project, which was we were looking for a tax neutral solution. So at $28, that's as close as you could reasonably get to tax neutral, I guess. Either of the other two scenarios effectively mean we have, if I have this right, either of the other two scenarios effectively mean we have abandoned the idea of a tax neutral strategy for accomplishing this undertaking, and that we're asking, in fact, for projects that will increase the tax almost certainly increase the tax levy for taxpayers in the district. We're no longer tax neutral, which is fine. If that's the judgment of the board of what we want to go out and ask for, and we can make a persuadable case for that, that's fine. But as long as I think we all recognize that tax neutrality is no longer part of the picture once we move from scenario one to either 2 or 3. Okay. I just want to make sure there was nobody, that I had that right, and if I had it wrong, you would correct me.
What are the numbers now? Tax numbers now? I mean, how does this compare to what?
Well,
How does it compare to the tax levy, you guys?
Yeah.
It's on here on the summary page, you got that, so it's a percentage of your 18-19 tax levy, so, item number 9 there. You see that, the increase, so that $26 for the star homeowner in scenario 1, would represent 0.78% of an increase on the current year's levy. So from 0.78 on the low end to almost 2.6 on the high end, is the percentage of the increase on the current levy. And again, that's a one-time increase, and then you're at that level going forward. It doesn't drop back down, but it's not a year-over-year 2.5% increase. It's a one-time jump, and then you're at that level for the next 15 years for the project.
2 other questions for me. The 500,000 is the tax assessment of 500 or an estimated market value of 500?
Full value.
And then so see that there's less coverage, there's less aid, there's 10% aid on a smaller proportion as you move from scenario 2 to 3. Is there, and it may just be, it's not, the calculations aren't here of the actual net of aid total amount that we'd pay, you just cut right to the implications for the taxpayer, is that right?
So what was the question?
Like, I don't see on here anywhere the buildup of, there's 10% aid, how many dollars is that 10% aid, therefore?
Yeah, we have underlying maturity schedules for all this.
It's just not in here, right?
Yeah, but we just kind of took, at the high level, we say, what people don't necessarily, we would think anyway, that people don't necessarily care about what the maturity schedule looks like, they just care about how it's gonna look on their tax bill. So that's why we kind of cut to the chase of what it is to the homeowner. But I do have those numbers if anybody wants them in terms of what the debt service versus the aid would look like in each scenario.
And is there, this is assuming there's no change in the debt service to the school, the delta has been made up by increase in tax, is that right? Like, would all these scenarios have the same amount of debt service payment by the school?
No, the debt service would go up, which is what would generate the need to have the increased tax.
I understand, but I mean net of the tax, there's no, assuming we're getting additional revenue to cover the difference, correct? Not going further into reserves to cover the difference.
Right, yeah.
All of the difference in
All
debt
the difference
service
would
is
be
covered by
from
this
the
tax. Got it.
From the drop off and, partially offset by the drop off in the existing debt, but all the
I
increase would be.
I just want to make sure it wasn't the
tax.
additional taxes and we were still.
No, you're not
additional
looking at
taxes
any
covered.
reserves beyond the 921 of capital reserve that you're putting in the project vote.
And the debt service per year after the tax increase is the same as it's been historically?
I
Is that the,
don't know if I can check, I would imagine it'll be a little bit higher.
It would be a little bit higher, I mean, right now we're, net of building aid, I would say that we're around $450, I think, a year is what we're paying.
Yeah.
So I think it goes up to about $480.
And
Well,
then-
going back to
yeah.
your schedules, I mean,
But that 480 is covered by the $28 tax increase, right?
yeah, that's.
That's scenario
Yep.
one. And then,
Yep.
okay, so I'm trying.
Got it.
I just wanted to make sure we're not both asking for more taxes and having additional
Right.
incremental payment.
I wanted to speak to Ray's distillation that, once the facilities committee and when we understood the severity of the problem within the heating system, that is to say that we would have to replace this heating system, the possibility of obtaining tax neutrality on this project took a severe hit. So what we had to do is scale back on a lot of things that were of non-essential nature, so that we got to a point where we stripped the project of all non-essential work. And what we're giving here is just what we're recommending that this project embraces a kind of bare bones aspect to the project. And even so, the way we have to scope this out is to be mindful of trying to capture a realistic expectation for this project, financially. You don't want to under bond.
Other questions for Jay or Garrett? I have one. In order to put this before the voters in May of 2019, along with our regular budget, we need to do what by when? So that I want to be sure that you leave here tonight with the direction you need to get us to the point of being able to put these two scenarios before the voters in May of 2019.
So the last slide of the presentation, so assuming the May 21st vote with your vote for your budget, the key step, kind of driven off of the publication in the paper has to be 45 to 49 days before the vote. So driving off of that step, we would say that everything has to be in the paper by the end of March. So your March board meeting, March 20th, is when you would have to adopt the calling for the vote and then adopt the wording of the proposition. And the other key step that you have to do prior to that is adopt the seeker resolution. That's the first step. And Garrett might be able to speak to this a little bit, but we're anticipating that would also provide, require some initial work before March, based on the time period to do a coordinated review for seeker. So as far as the kind of the last step, the call for the vote, that has to occur in March in order to hit that May vote date.
Tell us about the secret review, because there was some question as to whether we're looking at a level 1 or 2.
So we had originally anticipated this project to be a type 2 seeker, which is the more straightforward, easier process. After further evaluation, we're believing that it's probably going to be better and more conservative and safer to see this as either a type 1 or an unlisted action. We'll have conversations with your attorneys to determine which that is. That adds a few extra steps in the process that take some extra time. And so what our recommendation would be is that we work with your seeker attorney between now and a board meeting in December. We come back to you in December and explain the seeker process and what the timeline for that would be. But it will very likely include an environmental assessment form, EAF form, that then gets sent out to potentially involved agencies. They have a time period to react to it, and then the board will take action after that waiting period occurs. That would, the board action would happen still in March, or sometime ahead of March. So we have plenty of time to do that, but we think it's better to do the more conservative approach on seeker.
Who do we use? Who's our secret counsel?
You have two, well,
Do we? Well, sorry.
Our general counsel, Garrison,
Is
will
it Garrison?
handle that, probably in conjunction with our bond counsel,
Okay.
which is Ken, as far as Dempsey is the firm.
Right. David, you have a question?
Yeah, I apologize if I've had a brain freeze on this, but the difference between scenario 2 and scenario 1 is air conditioning, is that correct?
air conditioning for the entire
For
building,
the
yes.
entire building,
For the classrooms. the
Classrooms,
entire-
not, I'm sorry, not entire building.
Yeah.
You're right.
for the classrooms.
Classrooms, correct.
And are we comfortable presenting the voters with scenario one, which would not include air conditioning?
Well, let me and try to answer that question by asking the question I wanted to conclude with, was what happens if the voters say no to scenario 2?
The recommendation of the facilities committee is that we pursue 2 and 3 scenarios.
Well, that's,
2 and
yeah,
3. But,
Oh.
But they-
just to clarify that for you, David.
But the voters would have a choice to say no to both, correct? What happens if they say no to both?
So the board would then have options. So neither scenario, neither bond would pass.
Right.
So you would not have a capital project to move forward on.
Right.
You would have to at least wait 45 days to bring another referendum to the public. If you brought exactly the same referendum to the public, you'd have to wait 90 days in order to do that. So basically, if they both went down, you'd have to revote another
Yeah,
project.
that's good. But we still have scenario 1, the base case,
You could
if we
revote
wanted
it
to
as
do
that.
that.
Sure.
If you were to do scenario 1, this is all hypothetical. If both scenario 2 and 3 went down, neither was approved, which the voters are certainly, they have the way the resolutions are written, they have the opportunity to say no to either or both. If they both went down, we'd have 45 days in which time we could, after which time we could put up the base case scenario number 1.
Sure.
Does the 45 days or thereabouts that it would take to get between those two votes crowd out, or does it impact our ability to roll one financing into another? Remember, we had said all along that what we wanted to do was structure the timing of this transaction such that debt service on the existing debt would roll off at precisely the same time the new debt service rolled on, so that you would not have a drop and then a spike in subsequent years. Could we, with it, again, I'm speaking hypothetically, if we waited 45 days and went from May of 2019 to July of 2019, could we achieve the seamless, again for want of a better word, tax levy that we're...
Yeah, you should still be fine. I mean, this is like the ideal timing where like, following like the normal mechanism, kind of the normal timeline of a project would
Right.
ideally fit for filling in that drop off, but there's always other options, as long as you have a positive vote prior to the year where the debt drops off,
Right.
then you have options to fill it in, because we could always kind of make a larger earlier principal payment than we're legally required to.
Right.
If we wanted to keep there, so, but you'd have to get a little bit more creative with the financings in order, the closer you get to that drop off versus now is kind of the ideal time where it fits,
Right.
on a kind of natural timeline with the, to dovetail into the drop off.
Let's hope this remains a hypothetical conversation. Any other questions for Garrett?
Just one, so if I was just relooking at the numbers, Garrett, so maybe I had it wrong, the 500 to $1 million was the incremental cost of just the geothermal, right? So then the difference between scenario 2 and 3 though goes from 757, call it 76 to 88, like 1.2 and change. Is the air conditioning also there? So that's the million plus 200,000. Where's the extra 200?
Two factors in that. One is the air conditioning for the middle school. That's an added. Okay.
But that's already added. That should be in the delta between 2 and 3.
Okay, so you're talking about comparing 2 to 3.
Right.
The other difference is that the $1 million is construction budget, but then you have to run it through contingencies and incidentals.
Oh,
it's
so that wasn't in the
extra
500. Okay, so
Exactly.
it's just adding the million plus
plus all
all the
the
other
contingencies and
associations.
incidentals.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The other thing I'd ask my own question, and I'd like the opportunity to answer it, which is, what else is left what other things are in the bond besides the heating system? We spent a lot of time talking about the heating system, everybody's referred to it. I thought it might be helpful if I just list off some of the things that are the other core parts of the project that are really
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely.
Roofs, exiting out of the courtyard, building fire safety improvements, bathrooms. I mean, that's kind of really what started all this, was the bathrooms.
I know.
Flooring replacement, abatements, ceilings, new lighting, which is LED lighting, which is reducing your energy demand. Fire detection system upgrades, classroom casework replacement, play area, playground enhancements, removing the computer lab, new carpeting in here, art room upgrades, video surveillance and access control system, so security, a big portion of security system. New phones, so voice over IP phones, ADA improvements, nurse bathroom upgrades, and accessible route improvements. So I know we spent, and
A lot of time on.
and rightfully so, it's a very big portion of the project, somewhere between 35 and 50% of the project, depending on which scenario. But there are all these other things that were really the main drivers for the conversation early on, and those are still in the project. So I just wanted to
So
remind
sorry,
you.
in the 7 million scenario, it's 35, the heat's 35, and all the stuff you just described is 65%? Roughly?
Yeah, exactly, yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
One last entirely self-interested, well, I shouldn't say last question, for me, one last question, entirely self-interested question. The computer lab will come down, so
Yes.
we'll redo this space. Will this space be air conditioned?
Yes.
That's all I needed to know.
Only a seat, right?
Only in the winter.
Well, in the, right.
It's
You still open the door, right? All right.
It's important to know that air conditioning is not a separate system in either of these cases.
Right.
That we're folding them into,
Yeah.
that the air conditioning option is actually just amending the heating system so that we can provide cold air through the same system. So it's not like we're adding a whole nother system in the building. We're just amending the infrastructure that we have, and the same is true if we were going with the geothermal. It comes with an air conditioning quality. So I just want to put that in everyone's perspective, the public's perspective, that the AC system is not a complete different system. It's part and parcel of the changes that we're making. We just think with all the weather events and the extremity of weather and the possibility of providing a hospitable, cool environment for the employees and the students is an undeniable opportunity for the public to vote on supporting that, if that's what they chose to do.
Is everybody on the board clear about where we're going from here? Does anybody have any more questions for Garrett and Jay? Colleagues and guys, you've done yeoman's work throughout a very lengthy process, and we're deeply appreciative. We look forward to seeing you back here again, I guess in December with the SECRA, or the SECRA update. And Laura, Sue, Mike, Garrett, Jay work together to get us to the point of being able to approve something in March. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mary, can you just remind us, or James, you might be closer to it, when you have two options on the vote, what are the mechanics of the vote? You vote
Sue's best at.
yes, no on one, and then yes, no on, like, how does that decision tree work?
Garrett, why don't
I
you?
can speak to that.
Oh,
So
okay.
we'll work with bond counsel, Jason and I will, to set up those scenarios appropriately. The way I believe it's gonna work is that scenario 2 will be the base project, and then scenario 3 would be an add-on. So you have to pass scenario 2 in order to be able to get scenario 3, because you don't wanna just end up with a,
If I'm a citizen, I have to make two votes. One is yes or no to scenario A.
to the big to the whole project.
If I vote no, I don't get to continue to vote. I'm done.
Well, you can
If I
still
vote-
vote, but if the,
Negates anything you do above it.
right,
Correct, okay.
exactly.
But if I vote yes, then I have the option to additionally vote yes or no, or abstain on the upgrade to that scenario. Okay, good.
Garrett, have you had any experience with these kind of votes, with these sequential votes?
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little bit about how, I mean, what's...
So they require, it's a very good question, David, thank you for asking it. They require careful communication to the public because they can get confusing. So people are gonna say geo what, and that's gonna add to some confusion. So I think it's gonna require very thoughtful communications going out from the district to explain what's going on. Certainly, two votes are very common. I guess I want to say that a little differently. We have seen them in the past, I wouldn't say they're very common, but in this situation, it is the right thing to do. It's the best way to approach this. Let the voters, you put it out to the voters, communicate clearly, and then let them decide.
The wording is gonna be very important, and we talked about that in the facilities.
Right.
The wording is gonna be very important.
Yep.
Understanding.
I want to do some public awareness sessions during the referendum so that people can come, they can hear it, because reading it might be one thing, but just hearing it, asking some questions might be helpful.
Do you have any sense that having those kind of two vote situations makes it more or less likely to have the basic proposal accepted or rejected, and is there any history in that?
I have my own opinions, but they're just opinions, so I think it's, this is what we're gonna do, and
Not fact-based.
we should just do it, that's fine, let's get out there and let's do our best communicating to the public, that's really what it comes down to.
Thank you again, guys. Really appreciate it. Laura, I think you're next up with superintendent's remarks. Do I have that right?
Hello, Garrison. Nice to see everybody. I just want to say thank you, Sue, Michael, Garrett, Jason, Diana, Jill, and James. It's been a pleasure and honor being on the facilities.
And Mike?
I said Mike.
Okay, good.
And, I said you right? Yes. Maybe you should have been first on the list. But it's just been an honor and a pleasure being on this journey with you. We've walked away agreeing to disagree, agree to agree, and it has taken many different forms, but I think we're in a good place. So I'm looking forward to moving forward with all of you and seeing this come to fruition, whatever it may be. So thank you. Just a couple of things. A reminder, our next board meeting is Wednesday, December 12th at 7 o'clock. Just a reminder too also that our ELA position in middle school is now a full-time position. We have posted the position on OLAS. It has closed now. We received a number of applications. We have reached out to approximately 12 to 15 candidates for initial interviews. Alex and I are in the midst of scheduling them and interviewing, with the hope that we have a stellar group of candidates that we can recommend to the hiring team. And Alex and I are also on that hiring team, along with Robin Waters, Chris Caliendo, and Lauren Johnson. And then we hope to whittle that down to a couple of candidates that we will invite back for demos and make the decision of who our next ELA teacher will be.
Mr. Baskin, following that, you've got a pool of candidates now, you've got a process to take them through and get from 12 to 15 down to 1. How long is that going to take?
Well, our initial interview should be done on Monday, latest Tuesday of next week. Our recommendations, we would hope maybe by the end of next week that would go to the interview team, and we'll be able to interview that smaller group of candidates and possibly have the demos the next week. So
By the holiday break?
we hope so, absolutely.
Okay, so best
Absolutely.
case,
That's the best case scenario. So.
Okay.
When we left the last board meeting, we were tasked with coming to the board with a recommendation regarding foreign language, for current foreign language in the school, and where we want to go in the future with foreign language. So our next, we're going to schedule sort of a community meeting. We're going to invite community members, families, and staff to join us in this conversation and just see what do we want to do now, and what do we see foreign language being here at the Garrison School. So I'll keep you posted on the progress of that work, and hopefully we'll soon come back with a recommendation for the short-term goal and the long-term goal. And then lastly, I had the pleasure of going into the forest today, which was lovely and windy and brisk, with BOCES folks. And we walked the trails and talked about how we can partner even deeper with BOCES around environmental education and bringing more programs here and working with our teachers, but also working with their forestry program, their high school students, and possibly creating a maintenance plan, which would be a learning event for them, but also something that we could adopt and implement here once they have done their job. So we're very excited about this possible partnership. So they're going to meet as a team at BOCES, generate some ideas that they got while they were walking with us, and then we'll meet again and see what are the things that, again, what we can do now, and then sort of what's the future of our forest to ensure that it's safe and it's healthy, and that it's being used by the community as well as our kids and parents. So I'll keep you posted on our progress on that one too.
Laura, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 most likely alternatives on the foreign language idea? I mean, there are not an infinite number of options here, so what would you say are the leading contenders?
Can I come back to you on that? I feel like that would have to, I would like to give a conversation to sort of see what folks are thinking, what recommendations, what are the ideas out there. I have a few ideas, a few models that I've seen, but I don't know, I don't think that is what, that it envelops everything that exists out there. So,
And when are you planning that meeting?
I just have to get a date, I hope before the holidays to have
So
that
before
meeting.
the 12th or after the 12th? 12th being our next meeting.
I can try.
Probably gonna be
Probably after.
Yeah.
after the holidays.
Can you
Be after the
by the
holidays.
next meeting, give us a sense of what the most likely?
If we're able to have that
Options would be-
conversation with the community parents and staff, I'll be able to give sort of a debrief, draft of some things of the thinking going on. But I think this is it's a big conversation with a lot of thoughts and opinions and ideas. But we also look at finances and resources and personnel. So it's even looking at our program and time. Where is the time for all of the wonderful things that we want to provide for our students? This is one piece of a very big puzzle.
Questions for Laura? Okay, Alex.
One
Oh, sorry.
logistical question, just, anyone's welcome to stay, but do our architectural guests certainly
Oh.
are
Yeah,
required?
you got
It won't be considered bad manners if for the sake
Yeah,
of your evening.
thank you
want
very
to-
much.
Why would they want to leave?
It's riveting.
The next part's where it gets
They want
really
to
do this
good.
as quick as we can.
I just wanted to make sure you
Thank
weren't
you.
feeling
We
obligated.
want to be
sit here.
available if there are questions.
Okay.
They're getting attached to us now.
And vice versa.
Huh?
Alex.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be brief just as we've had a very nice detailed presentation. So welcome back. Just hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. Just a few upcoming events tomorrow. We have our rescheduled due to snow from a few weeks ago. We have the International Potluck and Musical Showcase, thanks to our PTA. A number of our parents worked very hard, as well as some of our students. 3rd and 4th graders will be performing, along with some musical performances that evening. So please come and attend. It will be full of food and festivity. Report cards have also been released for our middle school students since they're on the trimester schedule, so that has gone well with our release on the parent portal. We've navigated some of the digital steps quite well, so elementary will be shortly into next week. Parent-teacher conferences will be Friday the 7th as well as Friday the 14th, and then our music concert and choral concert will be the 13th, Thursday the 13th, so quite a busy time this year. So.
Thank you, Alex. Questions for Alex? If not, Sue, Treasurer's report.
The treasurer's report. First I'll go over the multi-fund account, which started out the month at $2,117,931.07. We had income of $2.7 million, mostly from taxes in October, and some state aid of just under $70,000. And we had expenses of $3.7 million. Most of the $3 million was a transfer over into the investments, which I'll explain when we get over there. So we ended up the month in a multi-fund of $1,137,001.02. And on the multi-fund, we started out with $7,180,374.43. There was minimal interest of $5,989.91, and the transfer there of the $3 million from the multi-fund. So we ended up the month in October with $10,183,304.34. So basically, taxes have been collected, turned over to Putnam County, and we're good. I spoke with Putnam County yesterday. We're all good to go with that, so everything was copacetic. That's all I have to say with the treasurer's report. So you have to.
Right now, I know they got the resolution, but first, any questions for Sue on that? that case, resolve the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District accept the treasurer's report for October 2018 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. No abstentions, no nays. And budget status, revenue status, and warrants.
Basically business as usual. There really nothing to point out and say unless anybody has a question.
Each of those reports are in your package and online there. If anyone has any questions, kind of ask. If not, we can move. Yes?
No, it's good, I'm good. Thank you for moving forward with the project. I'm very excited at that, so.
Good company.
Thank you.
All right, we have a relatively brief consent agenda. So, resolve the Board of Education Garrison Union Free School District approves the consent agenda. Items B through E is presented. Item B is the minutes of our November 7th board meeting. Those are in your package. We have CSE recommendations. Those are also in your package. That's approved. We have a long-term substitute teacher. Approve the appointment of Mary Fopiano as a long-term substitute to fill the vacant English teacher position effective September 4, 2018, in accordance with Board Policy 6221. This appointment is intended to continue until the vacancy has been filled unless earlier terminated by notice from the board and will extend no later than June 30th, 2019. Another substitute teacher. That's to approve the appointment of Jody Folster as a substitute teacher for the 2018-19 school year at a daily rate of $85. I need a
So moved.
Second. Laura, just talk about the long-term substitute in light of the conversation we had a moment ago about the ELA teachers
Correct.
that we hope to have on board by.
Right, so Board Policy 6221 is a three-tiered process for paying teachers long-term. So the first 20 days, it's $85 per day, which is the sub-rate. And then once they're here on the 21st day, it bumps up to $150. And then on the 41st day, it'll bump up to one.
1,200 for BA step one.
Thank you.
Which is about, I think I want to say 58,000 is what BA was.
So that's what Mary Fopiano's doing with us for that period
For
of
how many
time.
How many days in are she? How many days in are we?
For Mary Fopiano, so she hit the 20 days.
What was the question?
Mary Fopiano was
How
a
many?
What are we approving for?
How many days?
It used to
She's
be-
starting in
She-
September, and she's
Yes.
still working.
Right, she's still working, but she's past 20 days, so she's at $150 a day. And she
Is it
passed the,
consecutive days though? Because she started in September, then we had Amy Novak,
yeah.
and then Mary Fopiano came back. So is it, we continued it?
Okay. So what we're
Her
approving
days
is,
are counted as they go along, I don't know.
Okay, all right. But in any case, we're
well
still,
over 20. She's past, yeah, the 20.
so we passed, but what we're approving is post facto. She's already passed these thresholds and we're approving long-term substitute at that pay level. Even though it's our expectation that we will have a full-time ELA teacher. It's our hope and expectation before the end of the year.
And if those thresholds are already standard, already part of the field, why is it necessary for us to approve this?
Because we're increasing funding, and funding needs to be board approved.
It's
Even though
just
it
the
is policy.
procedure.
So I mean, if we didn't approve it, she would continue, she would get the rates that you're.
She actually hasn't obtained those amounts yet, so she hasn't been approved.
We have to approve it in order for her to get paid. Is that the deal?
Yeah.
All those in favor? This is for the entire consent agenda, by the way. All those in favor? Aye. No abstentions, no nays.
Laura, just totally out of curiosity, the CSE recommendations, it has a student getting reading and writing 3 times 42 per week.
Good teacher.
Jody.
42 seems like an oddly specific,
Periods.
not 40, but 42. It's based on how the schedule works.
Yes.
I would remember, I thought Jody Foster was
Just-
coming.
Trivial curiosity. Scientifically determined you need
We're
42,
very
not
precise
41
here.
minutes
Not
of
43.
reading.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Laura, I just want to ask you, did Jody Folster before?
She was long-term leave.
See, it's different.
No?
Okay, no, but the name is familiar, I suppose. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Long
want to make sure I wasn't going crazy.
We have discussion items, basically committee minutes. Those are all in your package. You've had a chance to review them. But they're minutes from meetings of the Technology Committee, the Environmental Education Committee, the Safety, Health and Wellness Committee, and the Education Committee. Our usual practice is, unless board members have any questions about the minutes, or if there is a board member who attended one or more of those meetings and like to call anything to our attention, now is the time to do it.
It'd be great to hear from the Education Committee about what's been going on in that committee.
Who's on the
Is
education?
anybody there? Anybody
I'm
there?
looking at the summary here, it says, you know, world language is what is our collective goal, and would it be worth it to reach out to members of the education committee in light of the meeting that you'd like to hold about bringing foreign language back to the elementary, and if they, whether it's a subcommittee
Yeah, I think
or,
that's
but,
what I think.
but that seems like a good use of that committee.
We discussed that along with the subject of, and I believe it had been noted here as well, math interventionist or additional math support as a topic of conversation. Again, this was our first meeting, so my understanding, so we were basically setting subsequent meetings, but also focusing our charges or our topics that we felt were a priority. And the conversation revolving around world language was also led to our discussion of looking at the subsequent programs in Haldane and O'Neill respectively, just as we explore options. And then we also had understanding, some of our members gave some history as to the original plan to originally have the Spanish program be expanded K to 8 a number of years ago. So, you know, all these things were discussed, which was good for perspective for all of us. And I think I maybe, there was another topic of interest that's escaping me right now. Yes, so then just in terms of science, technology, engineering, just the interest of how can we build upon current programming, while we do a wonderful science fair, just seeing how we can further the efforts of maker spaces, and we've had discussions too of what's available right around the corner at Desmond Fish, so it's just a matter of is that something, again, worth exploring. So again, between I think these three main topics, those were the things that the committee came with. We decided we would step away, speak with constituents, community members, reconvene, and see if we had a better idea of which would be a focus for this year.
We also talked about a roadmap of really pulling out the pieces that were mandated to teach instructional time. To say these are the number of ELA minutes that elementary students and middle school students must have, again, across the content areas. And then look at the time that we have left for all of the things that we want to do, whether it's cursive or STEAM or foreign language or school forest trips and days there. So there are a lot of things we want for our kids, and we have 7 hours in the school day. So being creative and innovative with our ideas, but also being very practical and in our knowing of that there is limited time during the day that we can provide all of these great things for our kids. So really, as a district, figuring out what are our priorities, what is it that we want for our students, and invest our time, personnel into that goal. So we want well-rounded students, but we can't do it all in one day. But what we can do a lot, and what is that?
Which leads to a comment I probably should have made when we were talking, following up on your proposal to hold a community meeting or get community feedback from the relevant constituents groups about foreign language. I would only say that, speculate here, I think it's reasonable to expect that anybody you ask that question about is going to want more. John L. Lewis was asked what he wanted for American labor. He answered more. All right? You're going to get the same answer. We want more hours. We want more language. We want more activities. It's incumbent on you and Alex, I think, if you're going to hold these conversations, to frame them in such a way that those requests are balanced against the available resources. Because what happens if you don't is a lot of people put together wish lists, and you come back weeks or months later and say why we can't do wish A, B, C, or D. So before you go out and solicit these inputs, be very clear about what the resources are that you can commit to them.
Well, I was- If you want more, what do you want less of?
Right, exactly.
That's right.
It's not a.
And I think that's the roadmap piece, that's what's very important, to sort of get our heads around what do we have, who do we have to support any new initiative here. And we're also mindful, no matter what committee you go into, that's what they want more of. So environmental education wants more environmental education. Education wants more world language, math support, STEAM and STEM.
What is
You
STEAM,
go
by the
into
way?
wellness and safety.
Adding art.
Yeah.
Art.
You want wellness and
Using art and design, like art and design
The
instead.
heating system we
So
were
what is
talking
it?
about.
Steve Jobs.
What are the words, what are the words for STEAM?
Science.
Science,
technology,
technology, engineering, art.
So it's just art.
well done.
I would
Art
put,
in there.
I put environment in there with the E as opposed to engineering. I've got no problem with engineering, we need more engineers in the world, we certainly need a lot of engineers, but the environmental piece without, the engineering piece without the environmental piece is gonna be a problem.
Other questions on the committee minutes?
One quick one.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh,
Sure,
go ahead.
sure,
Go first.
So, on the roadmap, I think that we can be intersection. ELA can be taught outdoors. We can look at the New York State science standards, and they include STEM. So these things are not exclusive of one another, but they can be entwined with one another.
Interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary, we can cover lots of bases with interdisciplinary learning. But along those lines, I always thought it a bit odd that we have a committee called the Education Committee. It just seems like that's the pursuit of the entire venture, yeah. And I'm wondering if, I don't know what, when we say education, do we mean the academic committee? That was one question I had. The other question is for Alex, is like, you know, I don't know whether you've had much academic planning experience in your other environments. What I mean by that is like, how does in your history or in your past, how does one come about determining sort of the academic goals of the institution? You know, the education committee is set, you know, comes together and I guess determines for themselves what their charge is going to be. But what are they looking at to determine that process? And then what are the other models out there for determining the academic priorities of the district?
I think that's a fair question. I think the question you posed about the education committee itself, I think that's noted because I think everything's embedded within that same idea. So I think the way that we've been approaching is just much that we've reviewed all the charges within each of our settings and then really reminded that we are advisory in nature and that while we will want more in each of those respective areas to look, this roadmap I think was a way to kind of put in perspective the time that we have and thereby the resources that are within the means financially and fiscally as we make those decisions. In my experience, this is the concept of the education committee. It's new in some ways, but I think just like any process, it's just starting with constituents within that team and then determining. I don't know how frequently we met last year too, so my understanding is that this is in a lot of ways welcome because I think there's a number of different interests. So.
But I think if I heard it right, that James's question was about what your experience in your previous position, how this worked out in terms of establishing goals and.
Often in my experience, it's been a matter of strategic planning, and that it's often hasn't necessarily been driven by one individual committee, but it's a much more intricate, many different subcommittees driven by an overall strategic plan, much like we have our district priorities. And that is a quite arduous task, but it's time consuming, but it goes much beyond the work of one single committee, in my experience.
So you have a strategic plan for the academic pursuits of the institution. That's
Right, and that's all driven by the community.
Right.
So that's my experience.
Okay. Tiny question, the environmental system, we created a map of the school forest, is that available?
Yeah, it's on the website. Yep.
Now
And
we
there's
can,
the new one.
it is the new one?
New one, yeah.
Good.
And there's one hanging in the hallway. If
Yes.
you'd like to just have a preview.
The old one was badly misleading.
This one's lovely.
Yes, the new one is really quite good, and I would say, by the way, the old one is on the entryway board of the Snake Hill Road entrance. do whatever we have to do to
Yeah.
take that down and put the.
He was hiking in the trail,
Right.
up he came over a hillside with his, I think, with Ray.
Yeah.
With Ray, and I'm like, who is that man? All right, so I'm happy about the BOCES partnership, that sounds great. I'm wondering if, I don't know whether it's, you're focusing on that, of course. I was wondering if there's a way of triangulating with maybe the Taconic Outdoor Education Center or the Audubon or whoever else is helping.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'm just
And
wondering.
fourth grade just went to the Education
Yeah.
Center, so we have partnerships with them.
By the way, being told the map, the website is not actually the updated map.
Oh, no.
It's 2015.
Yeah, the good one for the, for use for orienteering and everything else,
I heard that was good.
that's gotta be replaced.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Well, or maybe multiple places, but I went to Popular Environmental
There's a-
Education
listen,
map.
There's a purple trail up there which doesn't exist on that map, and so,
Purple chair.
so anyway, use the new map. There are people wandering around up there right now, in the dark,
You ready to
trying to
roll?
find their way out. Yes. Public comment, if there's no more on the, public comment,
Pretty
please.
soon they'll have that little cottage all fixed
Right,
up.
exactly, they can spend the
They have a
night.
place to stay.
Anybody, Ms. Tormey?
That comes up as an Airbnb property.
Yeah, right.
Rocco. Well, I don't know,
Hi,
cover
I'm-
the geothermal.
Sarah Dormy, the president of GSEF, and I just want to thank our community. We're nearing the end of our fall appeal. It's been very successful. We appreciate all the donations. They're still coming in. We had a really strong, positive response for Giving Tuesday, which is wonderful to see the community support us then. And those funds will go towards the grants we are currently considering still for spring. We voted on some, and I'll have a full list of what we have approved for you, hopefully on December 12th. Although that's my daughter's birthday, so I don't know if I'll have that unless she wants to come here for cookies.
Oh, sure, that's what you.
So, taking off the GSEF hat, putting on my parent hat to my second grader and my third grader, I had a question regarding the education committee meeting. Was Coulter's makerspace, Coulter Young, our teacher's makerspace, current curriculum talked about at that meeting?
It was, not a link, but it was
Okay,
that's
okay.
something that is in existence as part of our STEAM program.
Because I think he does a really excellent job. GSEF's funded, I think at this point, we've invested about $7,000, as an estimated number, into the little bits, the Goldie Blocks, and all the other equipment that he uses in that curriculum, which is about a 6-week program done in the spring, if I remember correctly. And it really highlights why art is important to have STEAM instead of STEM. While STEM is great, I think there's an argument to be made that for, like, my second grader, intelligence, artificial intelligence, things like that might be doing the engineering for us at a certain point, and we're going to need the thinkers of tomorrow to wonder, what are they engineering? What are they creating? What is the task at hand? And I think that's where the creativity is so important there. So as that committee continues to discuss STEAM and STEM, I hope maybe get Mr. Young involved. He has so many great ideas on this, and I hope GSEF can continue to also support that. And then I also had a question. A number of meetings ago, we had heard a few questions from Mr. Gelber about substitute teachers, and I don't think that discussion's come back yet. And I've been looking and tracking my third grader's planner that he brings home. He has a sub at least once to twice a week right now. And for a lot of this, it's for great things. For example, this week they're doing the reading assessments, which is fantastic. I think it is so powerful that we are using the Fontness and Pinellas, and that students get at least 20 minutes to half hour with their teacher. It makes reading feel so important. And I think that's really great, but it leaves a substitute in the classroom. So if there's a way, when that discussion comes back, to look at maybe having, whether it's pay scale or reaching out to having certified teachers in the classroom. So it's, when you're looking at your sub pool, we have more actual educators who are able to step in and continue the great work of our teachers in the classroom, so that it doesn't just sort of fall off. It's not to say the subs aren't kind, wonderful, and great that are in there now, but I think we could do a little bit better if we looked at that, and there is a significant amount of time. And on that note, I'd also still love to see a reading presentation on the Fontness and Pinellas things, if that's possible at some point in the future, because I I'm very impressed every day with how that is impacting my kids and the other kids in the schools, so.
Precisely, what are you asking for, a data presentation?
Yes, I'd
or
like to see-
how it is, like, how is it, like, just sort of foundational, like, this is what F&P does, and,
No, I'm not looking for that,
Okay.
although that sounds lovely too, but, last year when the reading scores were presented,
okay.
they also did a breakdown of this student is at this level and where they should be by grade level, not identifying the student by name per se, but saying we have second graders who are reading on these levels. Their goal is to get them to M.
I remember the
so-
presentation, is that wrapped up in the Renaissance stuff?
Yeah, that's when we had a team of teachers.
Right.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had the state test assessment, and then we went into
Okay,
more
great.
the local assessment.
So, well, the last presentation was informative. It would be great to see those test scores don't necessarily show as much about how our students are learning, because our students, I think, are hopefully benefiting from F&P. And I would think even looking at a comparison to the last year, you'd see a large improvement. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Two maps on the website.
I just pointed that
Yeah,
out.
we found it.
And the one that's under
The maps are
popular,
there.
the one that's under popular is not the one we want to use.
Yeah, exactly.
Ms.
I
Ford.
just wanted to say hi. It's Crystal Ford. I missed you guys. I've been around last couple meetings. So I don't know if you're actually going to proceed with the option 2 and 3 on the bond vote, but if you do, the PTA will definitely support you. If you'd like our help with educational forums or whatever outreach you need, the PTA is here to help. And then on another note, I find it really hard to access the agenda ahead of time. You know, that it's Sarah and me who come to the meetings every week or every month. But I think it would help, you know, if the agenda was posted a couple days in advance so parents could see if there's something in particular that they want to come and participate in.
We're mindful of
I know.
that concern.
But
The
things
board has
change.
expressed that concern as well, so I think we're working towards improving that.
And sometimes things change at the last minute too, so.
Or you're
Still, our
waiting
practice
on-
had always
yeah.
been to have it
The Friday before.
So, and that's what we're trying to work towards.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Kristen. Board member comment. We'll have a lot to say. Oh. What are we out of?
No, I just wanted to say, a couple of weeks ago, they had the thing with the veterans.
Oh, yeah.
I had Laura, Alex, the teachers and the children and everything. It was much appreciated and everything.
Thank you.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
And there's a
It
nice
was
photo
great
of
day.
Richard in PCNR.
I
Just-
saw
that. Yeah.
Yes, there
Good
is.
for it.
And I
Thank
love
you.
the flags even once they got snowed on.
All right, board member comment. I don't have anything.
That was my comment.
Just to make sure everyone's clear that once, I think we're voting on this PISA project bond next time around? No, I mean, when we're voting to approve?
Probably not until, probably not until March.
March is on your calendar.
Oh, okay. That's when the official thing happens.
That's
right?
when we would approve the
We're gonna talk
language of the
about-
resolution.
Well-
And secret we're going to talk about in December 12th.
Just to remind everybody that the role of the board is to put forward a bond to the public and provide a rationale for that, for the inclusion or the offering of such a vote. And at that point, we cannot lobby
Yes,
either for or against. It is inappropriate for the board to play that role.
Or the board members.
So, you know, it's not our position to say that we support that this bond be offered. The passage or the failure of the passage is not, it's not our role to lobby or to argue either way. Just, we argue for the rationale that this be an opportunity for the public.
Anybody
That's
else?
all.
If not, then resolve the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District adjourns its November 28th meeting to executive session to discuss, what does it say, personnel matters? Personnel matters.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Well done, everybody.
So
Thank you guys again. Thank you, members of the public.
Oh, it's
What? Yeah, do that.